I mean, we can get started. People would trickle in. Yeah, you have a question?
Yeah,
Yeah, good.
I have,
Okay.
someone with my domain, but, um, so I got some help from Siri and some blueprints, but I'm also curious, like, I have an animation and I think of what whole sequencer. Is there a way that I can put that animation into like directly, like link that directly? Because I kind of stitched together a bunch of different mixed-up animations, and when I get to blueprints, I might do more than 3 things. Like, I kind of like lose track of like, how is it?
Okay. So what's the objective? You want to share your screen and then show me what the animations are and what you're trying to achieve?
Where do I get the link?
This should be on the Miro board. You go to the Miro board. The class menu is on top. No worries. Anybody else have questions? Just so I know next time things. I know Tara, you want to go over some of the. You think of any? How's everyone feeling? In control or no? Okay. You still have a week. You have longer leave. Don't worry. Yeah. Everyone else feeling okay? Like you should at least be kind of like hovering here. Like, doesn't have to be. Like, who's like down? Yeah. Andy, you're this. Tara, you seem to be okay. No.
I think what I can do.
Yeah.
within the-
Yeah, I mean, like, guys, this is your first time ever using. You're making a video, right? Like, come on, give yourself some credit. It's on the top, or the link to the Miro itself. I emailed that to you a while. I don't know if, let me put it in the chat. Are you in the Zoom? Oh, no, you're not in the Zoom. You need the Zoom. Let me copy this. And
Shows up in
can you just type this? Is that visible enough? It'll probably be faster to do that than for me to go into the email and send it to you. Okay, well, we could do Tara's. So Tara's question was like, she wants to add some background information. And just sort of create a billboard. Oh, sorry, let me go back to that. Do you need it? Or do you want to do this instead? If you photograph that, that might be easier.
Thanks.
And so, let's open my scene. So one thing is, it seems like you want to view this from the interior of a space, right? So what's kind of easy about that is you're framing that view through a window of some kind. So you can kind of control and limit how far someone can see. So let's do something similar with my my sample scene, right? Say I want to be able to view out of this particular capsule and see something of the city skyline. And I want it to not just be flat, but maybe have some appearance of parallax. But I'm not going to worry too much um, about how fantastic it looks. I just want to create some background information. So this is very much about the background, not the midground or the foreground, which would require a lot more detail, right? I think the easiest way of doing that is to create essentially like a billboard or like a Potemkin kind of village. So I can extrude a plane. And make it as big as I need to. That makes sense for my purposes, which is to more or less block a portion of the player's view, right? So if I were to place a camera in here, and I'm just doing all of this in Rhino to start out, and then I'll move into Unreal to test further, or just to make sure it works. I'm gonna just create a line here that's about 6 feet tall. It could be shorter. I'm not 6 feet, so I'm gonna make it shorter myself. So let's make it 68 inches. Right. Let's go back. So, I guess this is in maybe centimeters or millimeters. I'm going to change the scale of this. So 68, and I'm just adding a quote mark for inches. And then I'm just going to copy this and move this over a little bit. Like down or something. Yeah. Right. So there's something inside, there's something outside. And all I'm going to do is place a camera and target, just to kind of do my best to accurately, right? And then I could just move things around, right? And so we can see that I'm looking at the plane that I just created. I'm gonna go to rendered view here. Right? And so I'm going to set this plane up to receive some kind of visual information, right? The other thing I could do is, let's say I want to use this image or this image. I can just download and import that particular image into my scene, right? So let's do that. I saved this image to my desktop. Let's find it. Here it is. I'm going to drag this into Rhino. And I could just bring it in as a picture. Scale this up, right? So I could have dragged an image directly onto my Rhino plane and it would have wallpapered that plane with my image, or I could just drag the image directly into Rhino. It'll create a plane for me, and it'll be at the correct aspect ratio. So maybe that's slightly easier, right? I'm going to rotate this image. so that it's standing vertically. And now I'm gonna move this in front of my scene such that I'm gonna try to roughly fill my frame, right? Like you'll do a better job at this. You'll find a better image for this purpose. Right, so let's just say something like that, and I could even bring it in closer. Right. And so then I could export this with my datasmith update and bring this plane in as well. One thing I might want to check is the normal of that. So I'm going to check offset surface. And it's going to show me what the positive normal is. And in this case, it's pointing towards my camera, which is what I want. So I don't have to flip the surface. Remember, the back sides don't render in Unreal unless you make it a two-sided material. So it's just better to turn your normals accordingly, right? I could also just export this individually as an FBX file. I think since I already have my Unreal project going, I might just do that. So let's go in and open that scene. This is the one I was working on last. And while that's happening, I'm just going to do the FBX export, right? So file, export selected. Let me just check my units real quick. Because if you do an FBX export, you're going to want to make sure you're in centimeters. If you do a Datasmith export, it kind of knows how to convert all of that. This is in millimeters, so I'm going to switch to centimeters. Click OK. Scale my scene. Let's find that. Yeah, okay. So file. I could also scale it in Unreal, but export selected. I'm gonna try to keep this organized. All right. So in my assets, I have a static mesh folder. I'm gonna find Motion Builder FBX and put this, name this background. I don't need to export lights or views. I think this is fine, right? It converts your NURB surfaces into meshes. And so if you have something very simple, like a plane or just box-like geometry, you're going to want fewer polygons. If you have a lot of curves, you can kind of ramp this up, but it's just going to increase your polygon count, which could affect the performance of your scene. Okay, so I'm just going to reduce my polygons because I don't need it to be highly detailed. And I'm going to export this. And now I'm back in Unreal. I'm going to find a good place to save this. In my contents folder, I should have like a static mesh folder. Looks like I don't. So I'm just going to create a folder here for static meshes. And then I'm going to click on this add button. And I want to import something to my static mesh folder. So I'm going to highlight this top option. And I'm going to look for that asset. So that was in the asset folder. Okay, wasn't there a static mesh folder that I just created? right? C, navigate assets, static mesh background. Oh, it's on C. Sorry. Wrong place. C, again, assets, static meshes. So this is the FBX file that I created in Rhino. I'm going to hit open. I don't want collisions. It'll just create like a box collision around it. If you needed it, you could import it, but I generally avoid doing that. I'm going to go ahead and click import all. Thanks. And then I'm going to drag my static mesh into the scene. And then I'm going to set this to 0, 0, 0, because now it should place that asset in the correct spot relative to my Rhino model, right? Because the origin is always preserved. So now my Unreal scene, I can start to go in here. I'm going to bump up the camera a little bit and just kind of pick, where do I want to see this from? Where does it make sense? Now I want to slow down my camera. So I'm just holding the right click and mouse wheel turning to change my camera speed. And where did I have my answering machine? Here it is, right? So I want it to be the view from this space, right? And so I can move things accordingly and adjust, right? So maybe the character can only go from this point to about this point. And I just want to make sure that I'm not going to see the edges of that image, right? Just to block it out, okay? Then what I could do is just work on the image itself, right? Like I don't want to see the capsule. I might start cutting the buildings into smaller pieces. And so one thing I can do is go back to Rhino and start cutting almost like I would in Photoshop, certain aspects or certain parts of this image. Right, so let's take this and split it. So now I have a couple of different pieces. And delete those lines. Right, so now I have a couple of different pieces. And I can move these out a little bit. Or I can extrude surface. And I believe it should. I'm going to try that one more time. Let's see if I can make this a solid. And see if that preserves the image. So if that's the case, I could just move these forward. Copy this. Rotate it. And the reason I'm doing this is I just don't want to be able to see blank things on the side, even though the model might not look like this. I'm going to see it from a very steep angle. So this might be okay. Right, so I'm kind of getting a more of a parallax view. I can chop this up even further. I can rotate and angle, change the angle of these things. I could also clip out the sky as well. I could bring it into Photoshop. You could probably use like the AI tools in Photoshop now to delete like the capsule itself and try to fill in the background, right? Whatever it takes to get your image 85 to 90% of the way there. Doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, especially if it's something that's in the background. I don't know that this has the AI, so I'm not going to try it. But I could stamp and get rid of or collage other buildings in. This is actually a pretty low resolution image, so I might look for a higher resolution image, right? So I've positioned this. Now what I might do is go back to my Rhino model. Where's my Rhino model? Here it is, right? And so I might just replace that FBX and see what that looks like. The file export selected. Here, let me join them first. File, export selected. Call it background. Do I want to replace it? Yes. Okay. And so now go back into Unreal. Right click on my static mesh. Re-import with new file. Right, so now I have my slightly more complex mesh. And so from in here, I can start to see, okay, when I move over this way, I'll start to kind of get a little bit more of a parallax effect, right? And I'll continue to do that until like there's enough complexity where I'm starting to like feel that the effect that I'll get in VR. And of course, I want to test it in VR too, especially if that's the intended final outcome of this particular scene, right? So the way I would test it in VR, obviously, is I can get my player start. Sorry. The other thing would be to use the inside of a cylinder, right? If you want to make sure that nothing is visible, right? Like you don't want to see.
Go ahead. The collider.
Huh? Hello?
Actually, I can.
Is that Kai Wen? Who's on Zoom? Right, you could use the inside surface of a cylinder to do this. So I just made a cylinder. I can explode it. I don't want the top. I don't want the bottom. Right, I might stretch this. Let's turn off here. Right, but in this case, you're definitely gonna have to flip the normals, right? Because if you do offset surface here, see that all the normals are pointing out. So I want to use the flip command to change, no worries, right? And so then I need a 360 image to use for this, right? So then I could go online, Tokyo skyline 360. Right, it doesn't have to be a full 360, honestly, because you're I mean, assuming that you're not gonna look all the way around. If your character can look all the way around, then you may want a full 360. You could certainly find an HDRI image and put that on a sphere, on the inside face of a sphere, if you want to start cutting that up. Or you could just import the HDRI and use it in Unreal as well, if you have a specific background, right? Maybe this feels panoramic enough for me, although it's a very small, low pixel image. Let's see if I can find something a little bit higher res. Yeah, maybe this is okay. So right click. Save image as. Put this on my desktop. Let's just type. Okay. And in this case, I won't drag that image in. I'm going to actually drag that image onto the cylinder. There it is. I can drag this onto my cylinder. I'm going to hide this. I don't need this. Right. And so maybe this is a little bit too big. Let's see if I set my view target again. So right click, set camera, place camera and target. Blocking my view. Some kind of a clipping plane. So what I might do is shrink this cylinder a bit. It's too big. I'll shrink it from the center. Right, but you can see it doesn't really, if you're using a cylinder, it doesn't really change the appearance of scale, even though I make it quite small. Eventually clipping again. I'm gonna make it even smaller. Right, so let's see how big this is. Quite large. So let's continue to scale it down and try to just fit my scene. Okay. Just trying to doctor this a little bit just to fill my background. Right. And even with a 2D image, or sorry, with a 2D panorama on a cylinder, mapped onto a cylinder, I could start kind of cutting out these buildings and pulling them closer, offsetting those surfaces, bringing them closer to start trying to get a little bit of that parallax effect as well. Right, using that same technique. So like if I crop this building and offset the surface so that it's closer and maybe make it a little bit bigger, I'll start getting some of that parallax effect without having to model the entire scene. Okay, does that help a little? Yeah. But what you want to do is just sort of compose your intended scene, right? Whether it's in your cinematic or in VR, you just want to make sure that you don't, quote unquote, break the fourth wall by showing the player the edges of your background. Has anyone been to Disneyland or Disney World? Right? It's like, that's what they do to keep you in the Magic Kingdom, is they never let you see the outside world. And so everything is covered over. If there's a big building, they'll put, you know, Toontown Hills, like, to block it. They'll put random things to block the outside world so that you're never breaking out of that immersive experience. So you kind of have to think like a Disney Imagineer for a moment. Okay. Are you ready with your question now? Yeah. Oh, I gotta stop sharing my screen. Yeah. So today is a work session day, so if you guys have questions, I'll try to answer them as best I can, or at least have something to, or at least I'll know to direct you to some tutorials or other resources that might help you. But Angie had a question about animations.
Well, I wanted to put this bit sequencer into Blueprint,
Uh-huh.
like with.
But what's the objective? Do you want,
Like, I wanted, like, after you grab something, like, from the model, it like transfers you to this other room,
uh-huh,
so that you're watching the scene happen.
uh-huh.
I think I was having trouble with this because since I have like a bunch of fictional animations,
Yeah,
I just had a hard time stitching all of them together.
okay.
So I was wondering if I could take animations made from the sequencer and like put them in Blueprint. It might be, yeah, I
So
don't know if that's possible.
I don't know that you need to do that just because whatever's in a sequencer sequence is in your scene,
Okay,
right?
but when I do simulate, like, it just here.
Well, that's because you're using the spawn off. So what's gonna happen is it's only gonna spawn that character, and it's okay. It's only gonna spawn that character when the sequence is playing. So what you really need is a blueprint that's going to play your sequence after it's been triggered in the scene. So you don't have to put the sequence, you don't have to put all these things in a blueprint. You just need the blueprint to then say, play this sequence, and whatever you have going on in the sequence will play out,
Okay.
right? So it's just kind of like a chain of events that you have to determine. So like, you know, you're in the flow house, right? So like maybe the chain is like go inside, presented with a table that has some kind of an object, right? Or, you know, my background, whatever that is, big window. So if I grab this object, that becomes the event, right? So then I create a collision box. Once I overlap the collision box, then I want a couple of things. Sounds like you want some sort of teleportation, right? And what's teleportation? Right? I'm just moving something from one place to another. Literally the way I push that button. I can move the player to any X, Y, and Z, right? Any transform that I, right? So I can, in my blueprint, right, maybe my blueprint is over here, for example, a blueprint will incorporate this object. Or I can just use that object to trigger blueprint to occur. But I want them to teleport to X, Y, and Z. And then scale with the one, right? Because I might want to re-rotate the characters so that they're facing in the direction, right? So teleport to, which is just moving placing an actor in a different location. And then the next thing I would want it to do is to play. And then once the sequence ends, you could just have the characters frozen there. You could loop that sequence. You could just stop the sequence and the player, all the characters. If you have spawn checked, it means they're only going to exist while this is playing. And when it stops, they'll just disappear. They'll just disappear.
Oh, okay. Can I set it so that once the sequence ends, that triggers teleportation
Yeah.
back
So
to
then you just have to add another node, you just replace this. If you want them to teleport back to where they were, that's kind of a variable, right? Because I might be standing in a different location, or if you know that there's a particular X, Y, and Z that they're most likely going to be at, you could just use that location and put it back into the teleport, which is going to be the same exact nodes. It'll be the same exact node, except you're using a different transit. Right? The other thing you'll want to do is the play sequences is just going to play the sequence, and that's the end of the action, right? So you're going to want to insert a delay, right, for the length that's equal to the length. That makes sense?
yeah.
You just kind of have to create that chain of events. And, you know, computers being somewhat dumb, it's usually a very linear event. And so the nice thing about that is it's easy to manage a linear event. It's harder to maybe manage what the player might do because, you know, we're just rats and mazes, right?
So but I need to
You create a blueprint actor,
I
right? And that blueprint will probably just be your object that's causing the action, right? You said you want the player to be able to touch something and then for this to happen. Yeah.
Okay, and then also, is there a way for me to like reverse one of these short animations that I imported from Fixamo?
To reverse it, like to play it backwards.
Yeah, or like, yeah, just
If you right click on that, is there a way of like, I think you should be able to easily reverse them.
like to duplicate and then reverse it. So, because a lot of the animations, like, if you were to have your character like standing in one direction, like a lot of the animations have different starting
Yeah.
like positions.
Yeah.
So that it's
Yeah.
hard to blend
So they
them
kind
in.
of jump,
Yeah.
right? So one way of doing it is when your start and end sequence start, right? So like You guys know what you mean by blending animations? Right? So like when you get a Mixamo animation for walking, for instance, right? Like the guy's kind of doing like a forward walk like this, and it's just one walking sequence. And then if you keep looping that, it just goes back to the beginning, but it looks like the character is walking, right? If you want to transition, let's say I want to have a character walk 2 cycles. And then I want the character to, well, start cycle. Right? If I put that salsa dancing animation, butt it up against the walking animation, the character is going to walk and then all of a sudden jump right into this weird salsa dance, right? If you click and drag this animation over a little bit, what you'll start to see is this overlapping area. You'll see kind of like this icon. What that's going to do is it's going to take the bones, like the final bones of the walk animation, and average it to the first initial bone positions of the salsa animation. That transition is much smoother. Right, and maybe I'll show you an example if I have some characters to show you what that starts to look like, right? But sometimes the walk animation appears to start in this point, and the salsa animation starts to appear this point. So then the character that's walking and then transitioning to the salsa appears to kind of slide over to a weird. That's what's happening, right? And so what you kind of need to do is key in this location the transform of the character to move back.
When I
Right.
key the transform,
Yeah.
sometimes it just, like, it won't play the animation, but it'll just have the position of the person change instead of both.
Okay. Can you show what's happening?
It's gonna change a lot, but if I were to put over I don't know, that's like it doesn't lie.
So is there a jump happening now?
Yeah. Or like,
'Cause it doesn't-
it's not applying the transforms.
Okay. Well, the transform, go to the key. So if you click on this. So open up the transform. You can see are the numbers. Or just go to location. You're just changing the location. Or are you changing the location?
I'm applying everything, except like I kept the location and scale the same, and the only values changing are
You're just changing the location.
yeah.
So it seems like you wrote too much, right?
Well, no, because this part has like the
Oh, it
edge.
has the location already. Right, and so left turn is the rotation. right?
Well, no, that's like what I downloaded from XML.
Yeah.
So if I.
So then, if you have, let's say this is not a walk, equals to turn. Right? Once the turn animation ends, she turns back to the leaf.
Because that's what the position of the next.
Yeah.
thing.
So then I wouldn't put this key here. I would put the key, the rotation key, like one frame before that,
Okay.
right? Or like, it's, there's a key. So it's, the rotation is 0, right? And then in the next key, at the very, what do you recommend?
Because like if I were to not apply these,
Yeah.
frame,
Yeah.
then the same thing happens. So I think right now it's just not applying the trans.
So what you want to apply, actually, what you want to apply,
I do because I have two.
yeah, I think what you want to do is make it kind of a snap turn. And see if that works, because the transform is being applied to the character, not the animation, right? So you just need that snap to happen right when whatever the next animation takes over. And see if that works. Or if you, put on this welfare animation,
Sorry, what?
if you highlight this welfare animation, you right click on it. There's a way of taking the position of the character at the end of an animation, and then once the animation ends, to then jump into to preserve that location. I can't remember off the top of my head how to do that. Yeah, so let me look for that technique that we see if I can.
Thank you.
Yeah. Was that it? Is there more? Okay, does anyone else have questions? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good way to attach their, say, that's something I wanted to make sure that anytime their, like their, I said this to resident. But like, if I wanted to like keep in there, to their actual control examples. So that anytime like it's like with what it is, so we need to. Because I feel like making a child with spending and you know. I guess like making with a child with
Yeah. It wouldn't work if the boat were a child of the player. It could work if the player were a child of the boat, but they wouldn't be able to teleport.
Yeah, even when the challenges, but they can't secure, everybody just get out.
Yeah,
So they,
yeah, yeah. So what do you want them to be able to do?
I want them to always be.
Always be on the boat?
Yeah.
So one is just to kind of get rid of the teleport option,
Okay.
right? So that they can't teleport anywhere. So don't have a nav mesh
but then become more.
They can move, but how do they move now? They are physically moving the boat using physics or,
No,
or they're using their controller
Yeah.
somehow? Okay, so if I push forward in the joystick, I go forward in the boat,
yes.
right?
But you.
So then that controls your local motion. It doesn't, it's no longer the teleportation function that's gonna do that.
Okay,
So I would get rid of the, if you don't want the player to teleport at all, then I would just eliminate the nav mesh unless the nav mesh is required for your boat movement. If the boat movement needs the nav mesh, then you could just turn off the teleportation function in your VR pawns blueprint, right? So the way you would do that is, let's find the VR pawn. So if we go to the VR template, go to blueprints. Here's my VR pawn. Remember, we opened this last time and we looked at the event graph, and there are all these, it's kind of noted for us, like what triggers things to happen. Here it's the teleport, right? I could just uncheck these, like disconnect these, and then the player won't be able to teleport. It might give me an error message, I don't know. Let's try it. Oops, sorry, I gotta hit Alt. And then hit compile, right? And it's still giving me the green check mark. So now if I play, I won't be able to teleport because I turned off that functionality here. So that's another way to do it. And hopefully that makes it work. Right? But if your motion controller, you're using the joysticks to move, you might have multiple kind of conflicting inputs. So just make sure to try to avoid that. So that you want your boat driving buttons to supersede the VR buttons, right? So that's the only tricky thing there. If it works, just fine, right? But if you're finding that if you're pushing a joystick and it's trying to do two things,
Yeah.
then you might have to turn something off. Does that kind of help? You think? So how are you doing the boat? You want to share your screen to us or no?
Sure, it's not much. Sure.
Or what, are you using a tutorial for the boat?
Yeah, so I use the tutorial to try to like add. Whether like movement. Maybe I'll share his own, and have his own.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I mean, when you're ready, you could jump on, but it's essentially there's an overriding way in which Unreal is going to accept inputs. That's kind of controlled by the game mode, right? Kind of more or less structure, right? Like the project versus the level. Versus, right? So if we were to diagram, right, we're basically working on the level. Right? And within that level, we have a pawn, which is our character, right? In most cases, it's going to be VR, right? We might have some blueprints within that level, right? So one or more blueprints. We might have a sequence, level sequencer in that level, right? Right. The level resides within our process. And we could have, this level right? So like world and levels. right? Blueprints are little worlds within our level. Right? These are all kind of things that are next together. But at the project level, right, we have something that's called a game. Right? And so far, we've been given. Right? And what the game mode does is dictate. Actually, have a the game mode dictates which pawn use, which is what the character, it's the vehicle that the character possesses to interact with this. Right, so it dictates the pawn in which case this is we are. And the project level, we also have a series of inputs. Right? And those inputs could be keyboard, game controller, VR, right? Whatever that is determined based on the game. Right? So if I have the VR game mode set, it's gonna tell Unreal Engine, okay, just spawn a VR pawn at the player starts or whatever level. Right? If I'm using the VR game mode, use these inputs, which will most likely be the VR. Which then I can say, okay, if I push the thumbstick forward on the right hand or the left hand, do this. Like press on the grip button, do this, right? If I were to use instead, it's not going to be. Let's say I change my game mode to the third person. Right? And then I'm gonna use, instead of the VR pawn, the third person character as my pawn. And my inputs will also change. It will no longer be my VR hand controllers. It will be either the keyboard or a game controller, in this case, both. That makes sense? So when you're changing to a boat, the boat is kind of a pawn. And the VR viewer is there for the ride. Right? If you're essentially using a blueprint to create a boat that's drivable, then I'm still in the VR mode using the VR pawn, and I'm still using the VR inputs to drive that ship. So then I could use an input action of pushing my joystick forward to then propel the boat forward that I'm standing.
So am I changing the VR on the console?
So one thing you could do is, if the VR character, if the VR player steps onto the boat, right, in which case I have my boat and I have some kind of a collider, right? And I have my VR player with a hand controller, right? If that player, right, and I also need some kind of a collider on that character. Once that character is in that collision, like overlapping that collider, then I can do something to switch the pawn from the VR pawn to the boat. Right, that's one way. Another way of doing it is if this coincides with this, then the inputs can start controlling the boat. Right? This gets to be very complicated, right? This is important if you want the player to be able to get in and out of the boat. Right? Maybe my recommendation would be the simplest thing is you put us on a boat. Right? So that there is no control that the player can have. You dictate the movement. And that would be like putting the character on the video. Right? In this case, you're putting the mouse in a very tiny compartment, and you're moving the compartment, and the mouse can kind of flip around. Right? If you want the player to drive the boat and move, that could be more fun for the player, but guess what? The player might just drive off into a direction that you don't want. Right? So that's kind of the caveat, that's kind of the risk that you take. And so, is it Pirates of the Caribbean? Or is it Pirates of the Caribbean? Like, or like a roller coaster, right? It's like a roller coaster. The roller coaster is on track, and so we're experiencing only what we can see based on what the roller coaster is, right? As opposed to a car where the character can drive the car. But I think what you want is to just use the rig rail so that they can only go where the big thing. But if you do want the player to be able to move around, then it gets a little bit right? You have to address that freedom of movement, switching, being on the boat and not, right? There are ways of having the character, if they teleport onto a specific location, that character then has to itself. So, right? That's kind of what the people are.
Yeah.
But if you want the ability of the character to drive the boat freely, then okay. But these are the ways in which one is to switch the pawn to the boat, so now the VR can operate as VR should. But once I get on the boat, then I actually have a new button set for the drive. That might be a little more complicated than you need to, but if that's super important part of your experience, then complete that. Right. Some do. Okay. Yeah. There's no easy solution, but it's doable. Any other questions? Do you have more? I could definitely take my.
Maybe can we do the question not so public, but you come to the desk?
Oh, yeah, okay, I can do that, yeah. You want me to go around? All right, everyone's just gonna work on their projects, right? Like, I can walk around, yeah. Who has a question? Who wants me to walk to them? Just so I.
Maybe it's 15 minutes.
Okay. 15 minutes? Okay,
I'll take this opportunity then.
okay, let me go to you.
Sorry, I'm like really bad. So if I think my issues like I'm gonna start. So like if I want to add, like walks right to where you teleport, so it just automatically. So that it automatically starts. But I guess I just don't know what it starts.
So, the way a script starts is an event, right? And so the event, what is the event that triggers?
I guess like teleporting into like.
It also has to be, because keep in mind, if I just teleported into a spot and then that event triggers me to teleport to itself, that would be a little confusing.
Or no, I mean like as soon as you teleport to a scene, like I want to make it so that the spot where you teleport to is like, I don't know, collision box that like triggers the gunshot.
The gunshot is happening in the scene, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let me try to do something kind of quickly here that might work with what you're trying to do, right? So I'm back in my scene, right? That I was working on last week. I want my player start. Where's my player start? So here's my player start. I'm just gonna move my player start a little bit here. And let me just set up VR for a moment. MetaQuest Link app. Let's turn this on. Also, I can't stress enough to, if your scene is supposed to be played in VR, make sure you're or as you go. Because if you hit the play button, probably not going to work if you haven't tested it. So I'm going to turn on my Quest. I'm just going to go to my, I just want to be able to preview this. All right, so my preview button is on. Okay, so here's my player start. This is where I'm going to spawn into VR, right? Say I want to, I'm going to, let's say there's a cube or there's an object on this table that's going to trigger a series of events to occur, right? So the event would be the overlap event of my hand that has a collider with this trigger, right? And so I'm going to create a new blueprint here. So in my blueprints, right, here's the blueprint of the buttons that I created. I'm going to create a blueprint from scratch. So blueprint actor, I'm going to call this BP underscore teleport anim1, right? So this is a teleportation to a series of, like there's a potential to teleport to a series of animations. Maybe that's the objective that you have, to sort of turn each of those sections into an animation, right? But there's one clearly of a person getting shot, right? So that's, let's say this essentially what this blueprint is going to want to do, right? So this blueprint requires a couple of things. Well, we need a static mesh, right? The mesh is the thing that we're going to be interacting with. Or at least it's the thing that's going to clue me into this object being of any significance, right? The static mesh itself doesn't really do anything, right? But it at least is the visual kind of marker of what that event is. So it could be anything, right? It could be the chicken nugget that I had downloaded. It could be any asset, right? So what makes sense, or I don't know what you're looking to make that trigger take place, right? But it should be intuitive in a way, right? Something that's going to, you know, make me grab it or sort of clue me in. So maybe it's like a gun, right? If the scene is like a revenge shot, right? So whatever that static mesh is, I'm gonna assign it here, right? So in this case, I'm gonna use a cube, right? This cube is quite large. Oh, I don't want the background cube. I want this. Static mesh cube. And I want it to be small. This is a meter by a meter by a meter. And so let's make it 10% of that. Right? And I can already drag in that asset to see what it looks like in this. Right? It doesn't do anything, but I can at least see it. And is it roughly the correct size? Right? If we want this to trigger an event, we need a way in which to communicate that. And what we do to communicate that is adding a collision of some sort, right? So, for just to show that the image or the static mesh itself and the collider don't have to be the same thing, I'm just going to use a sphere collider instead, right? It's just the zone that I need to cross over in order to make to trigger the event to occur, right? So maybe it looks something like this. So I just have to get my hand within that zone of the sphere, and it's going to trigger that event to occur, right? And so now if I look at my scene, I can see what that looks like, right? And so now in my event graph, with my sphere highlighted, I can scroll down on the right and I can see all of the events I can create with that collider, right? When something hits it, when something overlaps it, here, right? If I hover my mouse cursor over it, if I click on it, if I release it, so I need to click first and then release in order for that trigger to occur. Input touch. I don't know what that is. Oh, it's if you're using a touch screen of some kind, right? These are all the different kind of pre-made events that work with the sphere collider, right? I'm just going to do overlap. So I want one thing to overlap that collider, and that's going to trigger that event. So if I click on the plus, I'll see that I have an event. All events are red, and it says on component begin overlap, and it's noting that we're relating to the sphere here, right? If I rename this to nugget, right, it's going to change it to nugget. So it's referring directly to this thing that I added to my blueprint, right? And so what do I want to happen, right, when I overlap the event? So one is teleport, right? I want my character to go from its location now to a different location, right? So let me dock this for a moment and let's go back to our scene. So I'm going to assume that the character is going to be standing roughly here, right? I'm going to place a cube here just as a stand. Whoops. I always do that. Drag this cube, right? I'm just going to scale this down a little bit so it's not taking up so much of the screen, right? But I'm going to assume that the character is probably standing somewhere around here when they touch my chicken nugget or cube or sculpture or whatever it is, right? And I'm going to take that character and I'm going to move it someplace else, right? Say I want that character to teleport over here. Into my monster truck music videos, right? And so I'm going to just place a cube without knowing any better, like roughly what that location might be, right? I'm going to delete this cube later, but the reason I want this cube here is because I just need to know the location, right? And placing an object in space is going to help me understand what that location might be. So like maybe somewhere around here, right? And say this is the view that I, right? So first step is teleport to this location. I know what this location is because I just placed the cube there. I can right click on this and copy that location. And I'm gonna go into my teleport animation, right? And I'm gonna use that same node that I used. I'm just gonna have a photograph of it. So I can type it back in the search. Set relative location. But if I just type location, let's see if I can just look amongst the options that I have, right? So location, set actor location, set actor location and rotation, set actor relative location, set relative location, right? There's a lot of different, I don't even know exactly what all of these things mean, but I think this might work, set world location, right? Because we've placed that cube in the world location, and that might work with our moving our VR pawn, or maybe even just set actor location might work, right? So let's try set world location. And that new location, I don't know if I can paste directly into it. Maybe I can. So I'm just gonna take this out. Open this up. I'm just gonna type in the values myself, right? Doesn't have to be exact either, because I want them to roughly go there, not necessarily go, right? So new location, and remember, location is just one of the variables in the transform, right? So if I need the player to rotate as well, I might need that, right? I might need to set that because the player is going to stay in whatever rotation that they were in, right? So this might not be right, actually. I'm gonna set world transform instead. Right, so set world transform. And I'm gonna flip this pin structure, right? So I can punch in these numbers, right? So I want it to be 374 roughly, minus 550 roughly, minus 38 roughly, right? And that cube that I added is pointing at 0, 0, 0. So I'm gonna leave that at 0, 0, 0. So the thing that we're moving is the pawn, right? The problem here is that our pawn is not really in our scene yet when we play it, because we're using, as I showed in that diagram, we're using a player start to spawn a pawn into that location when the player is playing, or when the player starts playing the game, right? And so we can have this blueprint talk to that player pawn that gets spawned into this scene through casting, but that becomes a little bit complicated, right? Because then there's a lot of variables involved. I just want to simplify the process. So what I might do instead here is add the pawn instead of a player start. And so let's find that player start. I'm going to delete that player start. And instead, I'm just going to drag a VR pawn into that scene. Maybe I'll have the VR pawn facing this way when it starts. And then a VR pawn. So if you go to the VR template, blueprints, the VR pawn is what I want to add. This is what's essentially, this blueprint is what's being spawned into that location. So what I'm doing is I'm getting rid of that player start and just putting that pawn into the scene myself. Because now I have a reference to the actual pawn that I know I'll be possessing in the game. Right. And so in order to make my life easier, rather than trying to have the blueprint talk to whatever pawn is going to get spawned into the scene, I could just add the pawn to the scene myself. Right. If I were making a video game, I wouldn't do it this way, but we're not making video games, right? And so I also need to, now that I have this pawn in the scene, I need for Unreal to know that I want the game to possess that player. I want the character, whoever's playing the game, to possess that pawn. So I have to go to this auto possess player and make it player 0. Right. And so now if I hit play, oh, there's another player start maybe in this scene. Or there's another pawn in this scene. So remember last week's example, I had 2 pawns in the scene. So there was a pawn that was already possessing player 0. So it was possessing that first pawn. So I'm going to delete that. Now I only have 1 pawn and I should, right? I'm in the capsule. So I'm in the right spot, right? I'm not even going to bother to put on the headset. So it's working. I know I'm possessing it, right? So now I have reference. I have the actual pawn that I need to use to overlap that blueprint in the scene. And I want to set the transform of that pawn, but I can't really add that pawn to this blueprint. So what I might do instead of creating a blueprint actor is to do this in level blueprints, right? So that, do you guys know from the tutorials the difference between a blueprint actor and a level blueprint? No. So a level blueprint is a blueprint that controls the entire level, right? And you could think of the level itself as a blueprint, right? In our blueprint, we have, you know, the thing that we can see and objects within that environment, and we can create interactions with that environment. And that pretty much is what a level is, right? It's a scene. We can place objects within it, including scriptable actors and assets, right? But we could also just create code that controls elements within that scene to operate like blueprints, right? So the level is a blueprint, and we could put blueprints within the level, which is also a blueprint, right? So these things can be nested. The difference is a blueprint actor, I can move from level to level, but the level blueprint only dictates what happens in that level. Okay. So in this case, I might just create a level blueprint or not create, the level blueprint is already there. I might start moving these assets into a level blueprint instead, right? So I'm gonna click on this little icon up here and open my level blueprint. And my level blueprint is very similar in terms of the interface to the blueprint, except I don't have my viewport here because my viewport is actually the world. Okay. And so now I can start dragging things in, except I no longer need to, let's highlight this blueprint and delete it. Instead of adding components here, I would be adding the actual elements in my scene to operate within this blueprint, right? So if instead of that cube, I dragged in this cube. And then move this up. Right? I can now grab that cube and drag it into my scene, and I have into my script, and I have a reference, a direct reference to this. Right? So I need a collider for this cube. Or the cube is just a visual reference, right? So I actually don't need it, but I'm gonna just add it in there anyway in case I do. I also have that player pawn that I added that I also want to be able to work with the blueprints, because that's the thing I'm going to teleport. So I'm going to drag that VR pawn into it, and now we can see I have a reference to that VR pawn, right? So I have this, I need that same structure where there is some kind of a trigger or an overlapping event that's going to create that teleport function and then play my sequence, right? So back in my scene, so I'm going to just dock this over here. Back in my scene, I need to add the equivalent of that sphere collider. So if I go into my volumes, within that, I have trigger volumes that do the same kind of thing, right? So I'm going to grab my trigger volume out here. And I'm going to scale this trigger volume down. Move it over. Right? So instead of operating at the scale level of the blueprint, I'm now adding these elements in my scene itself that's going to speak to that's going to control or dictate the behavior of assets in my scene, right? So I'm just going to take that cube, right click on location, copy it, go to my trigger that I added. I'm going to just paste that location so it's in the exact right spot. And then I'm just going to set the scale of this thing to be roughly in that zone. I don't know if there is a sphere trigger. Right, yeah, there's a trigger sphere, a trigger box, trigger capsule, and a trigger volume. And I'm using a trigger volume in this case, right? But I could easily do that with a sphere, right click, paste the location, change to scale, right? And do exactly the same thing I was trying to do in that other blueprint. So let's just do that. We'll do the sphere instead, right? And so with my see, if I highlight this sphere and I go to my VR template map level blueprint, I can search for an event. I'll call it overlap, right? So I'm looking for a collision. In this case, I want a sphere overlap actor. No, that's not the right one, actually. See if I can have this. Let's see if I can just drag that. So let's see if I can just drag the sphere. So add event. Let's uncheck this for a moment. So I'm looking for an event that's overlapping this trigger sphere. So let's see if I can, no, touch input has more to do with like touch screens or trackpads. This is always tricky. There. You know what I think? Maybe it's in here. I always forget how to do this. Okay, it's at the very top. You see where it says add events for trigger sphere 1? And I want to select add on actor begin overlap. So it's just at the very top. If you right click in the blueprint event graph, it's sitting on the very top. And you want to open collision and say add on actor begin overlap. Right. And so what we want to do is overlap the trigger sphere, which is already being referred to here. And that's when we want to basically set the transform of our pawn. So let's look up transform, set world transform, set actor, let's see, set actor, location and rotation. We want to set the VR pawn. That's the actor whose position we want to change. And we want to change that to that Q location, right? Which is down here. So 374. Right, the location should be 374 minus 550 minus 30, whoops, tab minus 38. And the rotation is 0, 0, 0. I'm assuming that that's the correct rotation, but you can never tell with a cube, right? So rotation 0, 0, 0, I can see that my camera is pointing in the direction I want to be looking over here. Okay, so that's correct, right? So even at this point, I can test my blueprint, see if it works, right? All that should happen is if I touch that trigger I should just teleport to that other location, and let's see if that works. Play.
End of messages.
Here's that teleport. So I can't teleport, so maybe a quick refresher. Let's set up the collisions for that. So I'm gonna select this surface. Right click, browse to asset. Go to use complex collision as simple. Yeah, so I can teleport, right? So if I hit P, that's going to visualize my collider or my navigation, right? So whatever's in green is where I can navigate, right? So that's good enough. And now let's turn that off. Let's hit P again, or hit play again. And now I should be able to navigate. Right, so now I can navigate in my scene.
End of messages.
So here's where I want to stand. I'm gonna see, so now when I touch that, I've teleported to this location. Right, and so this is where I want to be, so I can see my monster truck music video, except I can't see the other player character, so I might move that location over a little bit, right? I could still teleport if I had colliders here, but I don't. All right, my nav mesh bound volume is hitting that location, right? So that's working. So check. And then let's go ahead and tweak this a little bit. Right, so let's go back to cube 6. I'm gonna hit, is that the right one? Yeah, hit F. And I actually want to be over here a little bit more. And so I'm gonna just change this. It's 225 instead of 375, right? So 225 and compile, right? So the teleportation part is, right? So now I want to be able to teleport. Maybe I'll let the player get comfortable because it's going to be jarring, right? Imagine being teleported somewhere, you're going to be a little confused. So I might set a little delay here and make that, a 2-second delay before something happens, right? And what I want to be able to do is play a sequence. How do I do that? Let's Google it. I don't remember how. UE5 level blueprint play sequence. Playing a level sequence from blueprint. Let's see if this helps us. Right? So all we need is a play node, and we need to add that level sequence that we have in our scene, right? So I'm going to go back to Unreal, right? I'm gonna look for play. Right? Sometimes you have to uncheck this box to expose other things. For whatever reason, in level blueprints, it doesn't show you everything. We just want this play function. So right click, just uncheck this. And then type play in the search. And you'll see this. And then what we need to do is we need to drag that level sequence. No, it should say just exactly what you see, which is play.
Oh,
And I'm going to grab this level sequence actor and I'm going to connect that to my target. Right? So now what this is going to do is it's going to wait 2 seconds and then it's going to start playing that sequence. So now I compile. Oh, something's going on. What is current value of the delay settings pin is invalid. Oh, sorry. I just want this to be a delay, not a set delay. Make that 2 seconds and then play. Compile. Okay, now that works, right? So all we have going on right now is when I interact with that imaginary volume, I'm going to move my character pawn to this location. I'm going to wait 2 seconds, and then I'm going to play the level sequence that's in my scene, right? And to get a sense of what that level sequence is, let's find that level sequence actor. We can open it. And as I scrub through, yes, you need to have. So in your marquee here, you can drag, you can have as many as you want, but you need to have a level sequence actor, right? So my level sequence actor is actually that shot that I was working on, so I don't want to use that one. I'm going to drag another one in. And I'm going to create a new sequence. So go into my cinematics. What is my follow cam sequence? I want to see what this is. I don't want the rig rail thing happening. But maybe this will be fine. Right? I'm gonna set that level sequence actor to that follow cam sequence. Right? Because that's the one where the 2 characters are dancing. That's what I want to be able to see. I'll also see the camera moving, but it doesn't really matter. Or at least I don't think it matters. And in my blueprint, I want to get rid of this one and drag in that second level sequence actor instead. Right. So I want to play where is it? I want to play this, right? And if we want to, make it so we can identify things a little bit better, I might call it level sequence dance. And then drag that in, connect that to the target of the thing I want to play, compile. And then let's see if that works. Right, so I'm going to hit play again in VR, pop the headset in.
End of messages.
Where's my So let's see if this works still. I can't reach it. Whatever. Now I'm gonna migrate over. After 2 seconds, oh, I possessed the camera, but I can see my sequence is playing, right? And so now what happened is my headset sort of possessed the camera that was in that sequence. And now I'm back to where I was, right? So you could even add a camera to your sequence, and your VR pawn for that duration of that sequence will follow that camera. So you can sort of move that camera for that moment. And once that sequence is over, then I kind of went back to my original position. So Uche, this might work for you too, right? I might be on a boat. You might play the level sequence where I'm like now in the camera watching something happen. And then at the end of it, I'm just going to end up right back where I started. Right? But what you want to happen is that at the end of it, I go back to where I started. Right? So I added this level sequence actor, right? Here I set that level sequence to the sequence that I want. So this would be your murder scene, right? And then in the blueprints, I'm connecting that level sequence to the play node. So I'm playing that level sequence, which I named dance, right? So I drag this in. Right? I drag this into my scene like that.
Is that same target?
Yeah, it just automatically creates this node. I don't know what it means.
Um,
Your level sequence won't connect to the play.
This is level after object reference, it's not how.
And you're in a level blueprint. You're doing exactly this, and you have a play node. Does it say something else? It should only say play. Right? And it should say target is movie sequence or movie scene sequence player. Is that what it says?
Okay. Okay, yeah. I
Okay.
think there's like another play that says target is supposed to be back.
Yeah. Yeah. Remember, computers are not intuitive at all. They're gonna do only that you tell them. And oftentimes yeah. So you'll run into that. I know it gets very frustrating. Why are there so many play nodes, and why are there so many set actor location nodes? It's really, it adds to the functionality, but maybe also adds to the frustration because there's so many options. Okay, so then I want to play the sequence and then have the actor go back to where it was, right? So I can just copy and paste this, right? But remember, if I do this, it's going to trigger this right after this plays, which is not what I want, right? I want to enjoy that dance sequence for a little bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into my VR scene and just kind of understand what the length of this sequence is. I need to know how long this is going to play for. 240 is 10 seconds, I think. Yeah. And then I can go into my level blueprint again, and I'm going to add another delay. And I'm going to make this 10 seconds. And then I'm going to set the actor location, right? In fact, I'm going to make it 10.5. 10.1. Just to be safe. And then I want to set that location to match this cube now, right? So I'm gonna actually, I'm not gonna copy it because it's not really gonna let me do that. So I gotta undock this. I wish it would size the screen better each time I did this. But I've highlighted the cube that I want to refer back to. I just need to change that location back, right? So minus 516. I'm going to be a little bit more precise this time because the capsules are so small. Minus 516.6 minus 1996.9. Is that right? 1996.98 and 1112.73. But remember the rotation now, I want it to face this direction, right? So essentially, what happened? Oh,
Following sort of
I'll try to fix that. The coder is not receiving the video. This is what happened last time. This is what happened last time, right?
But it didn't give that warning.
It didn't give the one, yeah. But I'm guessing that that's what it is. You can ask them, but all they're gonna do is make me turn everything off and on again, and the cost is gonna be over by the time that happens. Like I can restart myself and it not work. Just let them know too. Yeah, you can let them know. Can you guys all jump into the Zoom if you want to watch this? I don't think this is gonna be easy to fix. Let's try extended.
following sort of.
Huh?
Okay. Can you make it this follow the same?
Yeah. Okay. So Am I hearing an echo? Am I hearing my own echo? Whatever, doesn't matter. Okay. Yes, I'm definitely hearing an echo, but that's okay. So I want to set the location of my teleport to this. Oh, yeah, no, that's very important. Yeah, I don't know if this is an easy fix. It happened last time and you guys see it? Okay. So this is the location I want to teleport back to. Let me check my microphone. Uh-oh. It's okay, Jorge. I think this happened last time and it didn't work. So I think what ended up happening was the whole thing had to get restarted.
It really started, you can apply it on any of the tests.
Uh-huh.
It's rebooting now.
Yes. Should I turn this off?
It should actually be. But it's not.
So we changed the location. Match that cube. And we might want to change our the location to match our cube. We might want to change our location to face the direction of the trigger, which I think I need to wait a little bit. Oh, it's back on. That's good. How did you fix it?
So they actually reboot it and then this is open source.
Oh.
Basically just disconnected it.
Yeah. Okay, that's good to know. Last time. That happened.
It's a little bit more about actually. Possibly. Insert it.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
Hey, back in business. I should still share for those who are. Okay. Okay, we're back. So I'm changing the location of my new teleport, like the teleport back node to that cube that I had placed in the capsule. I do think I need to rotate this by 90 degrees. But I'm not sure if I'm doing it the right, if it should be positive or negative 90. We'll find out in a second. Okay, so let's dock this again. go back and test this out again. So I'm gonna hit play. So I'm in my,
End of messages.
so now if I touch, here I am. I'm watching my dance sequence. There's my music video. I've never danced like that in my life. Now I'm back and I should teleport back, but that didn't work. So maybe I need to delay a little bit further. Or I just need to get rid of the camera because that camera might be throwing off the. So let's go to the sequence. I'm going to delete my camera cut, delete the rig rail, delete the camera. And then I'm going to try again.
End of messages.
So I'm going to teleport. After 2 seconds, they start playing, except now I'm still here. I watch my routine. And then I should teleport back. Go, go. Why isn't it working? Oh, you know why it's not working? I didn't tell it what to teleport. I'm going to undo that because I do want to keep that camera cut in there. Go back to my, right? I didn't give it a target. It says the same VR target. Oh no, not this. But the VR pawn,
Yeah, so. It's.
right? If I double click on this, I can create a new node. In case I want to move this. Right, so you can kind of see what's going on. So compile. I'm just gonna set this to 10. I don't want that weird delay. And then let's try it one more time and hopefully this works. Okay,
End of messages.
so teleport. I might watch my routine again. And then I teleported to a very different location. Right, but I did teleport, which I'll consider a win, right? So strangely, I ended up back out in the hall for some reason. Maybe I entered the wrong numbers, right? But you get the idea, right? Okay. And so, and here's testing the little background in VR. You know, if I get close to the window, that doesn't work. So I might want to put a bed here that doesn't allow me to teleport over the bed, but I want to fill my, you know, make sure that I'm not seeing the edges of the frame of my background image, right? Okay. So there's that. It's a little different than I had initially thought, where it's a level blueprint and not a blueprint active. Okay, good. Yep. Are you ready for your question?
Yeah. Sorry. No, I'm talking nowhere. Like you could ask 3 hours and I'll say nothing.
I was wondering.
I'm sorry. Thanks. We found out how to do like proper displacement, like displacement. Let's see.
Are you doing, like vertex displacement? It's a little heavy on the yard.
Yes.
But in terms of like doing a sequence, your sequence.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just with this rough stone, like there's nothing more fringe you can see.
Yeah.
Yeah. You perfectly touch.
Yeah.
I had like 2 questions because like I'm really, but just like I spend like all today like on my research, which yeah, in the end doesn't even have to be handy. But anyway,
Well, don't feel it's good.
no,
For your.
yeah, no, I also did my research. I came in contact with like grad students, like grad students, and it was not a thing in Israel. And we even thought about taking this and go beyond 60. So this is nice, but I'm just meaning like a field behind.
Yeah.
But yeah, the idea is, yeah, how to do the path, like how should I do the path? Should I do like, because
How do you do the path?
yeah, because like here we actually see from this surroundings, like it's actually way cleaner. But normally, how would you do it? Would you do it green like texture and then what is
Oh, you mean for like
for the
foliage in the background?
yeah, for the background. Let's say here, like it's not that's like normally it's like all green, and then just like there's like a dirt path because people walk. What you do then now, as I did, or as I tried like all dirt, and then just put foliage everywhere. Yeah. Or would you do something more green in general? With the way I do it, it still looks like very like dirt.
Yeah. What's your reference?
American.
So I tell what you're.
Yeah, you found what it is. Like this kind of looks good.
But do you have like an image of what the path might look like?
No.
It's like, it's like,
It doesn't seem like that far off right now. Right. In fact, this has less green than the path itself. Um,
it's like I just use.
well, to answer your question, like, are you using a landscape or are you using a mesh project for the ground surface?
This is just like the overall landscape.
That you created, right? So what you could do is you could paint landscape textures. So how did you add the texture there?
Just just like this is a main, so I put a material.
But this is a meshing board.
Yeah.
Oh, I see. There's a, if you look up vertex paint, you can kind of take 2 different textures and create a material that allows you to like dirt over grass.
Oh, that's good.
And that'll like create like the type of blend that you want. You could also create them in your case, because that only works when you have one massive texture.
Yeah.
But if you're tiling your textures, it's not. So what you can do is you can create another mesh that represents your path.
Yeah.
Give it the dirt texture and make the mesh that's your ground, like a green texture. And then put foliage at the seams to try to hide that. Right. There are other ways of like making this like better, but maybe that's the scope a little bit. I can send you tutorials to do that, but we can decide if that's the right way to go. If you want to paint on a surface, it's one texture, also, right? So if you have a very large surface, you're going to start to see the pixels because it's one square image, and even if it's like a 4K texture, or even if it's an 8K texture, if it's big enough, all still see it, right? And so you can give that a try, but vertex painting will allow you to take that texture and essentially create a mask which will do texture. So dirt, grass, so I can do dirt, over the grass. You can do that with a landscape.
But then I have,
create your own.
yeah, so then I have to do something inside.
Yes. And you know, you could sort of create a landscape and start pulling surfaces up to roughly match what you have. But that will allow you to paint in this way. Right?
I was wondering, he's like, I think that is the answer, the answers are, I don't really get it, but it's like.
I mean, I think this looks pretty good. Yeah. But right, because it might, you know, you might want to tackle.
No, 100%. But it's like, especially in like this sort of like this very sort of kind of village, like how the building needs the ground is so important. Also to ask because I thought I would do like the more industry, let's say meeting point is novels, but yeah, like there would be a little bit of a downfall, right? But sculpturing is not the best way to go, right? It's like when I would try to imagine it's all to because in order to then like sculpture it, right? I need to sculpture it. Like it needs to have way more.
You need a lot of great stuff, yeah.
So I should rather just do a pad and just cut it out. Right?
How are you making this in Ryan? Is it all in?
Yeah, this is one.
So how did you make that?
So I got like butterfly, I got topographic line, then created the necklace surface out of it. And then it's kind of like, yeah, kind of tries to look good, like per se, yeah, give it a bit more.
Is it based on real topography or real texture?
Like it's based on Google Map or something like that. You know, because in these like with these villages you cannot use these Google Maps anymore. It's like because of all these building being destroyed, the topography changed. So I just used historic maps.
So one thing you could do is cut the the terrain that you've created into smaller pieces.
Yeah.
And so where, like, if your character is only occupying like a very small area,
Yeah.
you can sort of split that surface. Okay, and then rebuild just that area with the plot to its vertices, right? I wouldn't put that many vertices on all of this.
Yeah.
This stuff that's probably doesn't matter. Right? But you really want to, if you want to sculpt the surface that the player is going to stand on, what I would do is cut a small piece of it, rebuild it, just make it denser, and then you can start sculpting it. Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then you could also apply a single texture medium. So maybe the vertex medium, you can see that. But you want to deal with a much smaller surface.
Yeah, I thought like, as you said, I thought like it is why I now started to build the interior. I thought you would go from here inside towards the church.
Yeah. 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 And like, you know, even like, would you stay with them? I mean, I know that's not your scene, but that was a reference. That's exactly powerful. So like bringing a player into that cultural environment, like to be, especially with this sort of more intimate areas.
But this was like the second question that I had, where I get characters which are like not
That are not like,
white and not like
that is tricky. Hey, and you're using better human characters.
No,
You're-
no,
Yeah, where did you get your characters?
they look bad.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, you could look at metahumans, and you could change the skin tone, you could change like everything.
But how do I check the, it's like,
The clothing is going to be, did you see the thing that I sent you about clothing?
I didn't watch the one, but.
Yeah, so one is you can kind of create your own clothing,
Yeah.
which is hard, which is gonna take a lot of time. Right. With Mixamo, you're just limited to what's there.
Yeah.
If you like go to YouTube and just did metahuman tutorial, like you create like people based on different races, skin colors, things like that. And then there are those secondary apps that allow you to for them. So you would export your metahuman underwear, but it's on that. So and then yeah, use basically use Unreal animations. I think Unreal just released a bunch of animations teams.
Yeah.
And they'll probably seamlessly integrate this month. I'm sorry, to the next characters, but if you want them to look super custom, that's probably unless you could find pre-made characters that kind of
And then the one that I found. So. Okay, then.
I mean, it's good to sort of play with schematic if you want to like integrate into your workflow. The ability to create custom characters. Let's just look it up.
It's like, I found two scans of traditional Filipino clothing of clothes, and I've tried. I got like a woman which looked okay.
Yeah.
Put her into Blender and put like the dress over, and then try to export it and then put it into Maximo, but I couldn't read it.
Yeah,
It didn't.
it's because it's not a closed mesh, I think.
Okay.
What you would have to do is export the animation from Mixamo into Blender or another simulation
Okay.
software, and then have Blender simulate the movement of the clothes in conjunction with the walking animation and the different animations that you want to use.
Yeah.
And then export that whole package out as an animation that you can then use in Unreal. So does that make sense?
It makes sense,
Mixamo is
but
not
it's-
going to read the clothes, right?
The globe
Mixamo
is
only
just like a dense image.
yeah, so in Blender, you're essentially running the cloth simulation and then baking it into that character. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but it's this, in the scope of the class, or is it a bit?
It's not. I think it's a little bit too much just because it's a lot of work. So if you just did Mixamo characters and just made them kind of blank,
Yeah.
like gave them like an unlit gray texture, it might not achieve exactly what you want, but it's not distracting that they're like white faces in this environment that you probably don't want. The other option is if you can pose, like find a pose for the character, and simulate the cloth sort of draped over their bodies in a more or less accurate way. You can just have characters kind of as like mannequins standing still.
Yeah.
Right. But then you at least get texture information. They're not animated, but you're sort of seeing it like you're bringing to life a photograph. They're frozen.
Yeah.
So that's
like, this is what like one she did normally just cut out images.
Yeah.
From each end, that's said.
yeah. You could do like kind of 2D, like I did the buildings, right?
Yeah.
But you could do the exact same thing with people. And you could turn them into what are called billboards or sprites. And what they do is they always face the player. Okay, so no matter where you're looking, that plane is gonna rotate to align with the camera. Yeah, so then you'll never look around. So you just,
It's almost called
it's called a sprite or a billboard.
right.
Yeah,
Like how the dream. Right. like-
yeah, kind of like, or like a fairy. So there's like this thing called MetaTailor, which I think is a paid app. The one that I sent you a tutorial for at least has like a 30-day trial that you can try, but it's a clothing app. And so, I mean, I haven't really delved into clothing, so I don't know exactly how it works. But I do know that it's very possible. Custom clothing plus physics plus meta use. Like some of these things are just, someone will work on this for like a month and then they'll get like a 15-second video out of it. So you gotta kind of weigh. But if it's something that you want to integrate into your workflow, it's probably worth trying.
It's like, the condition would look a bit like.
I would use kind of like ghosted characters.
Okay, so
And
the
just get
video-
like similarity happen, like, walk around, like use.
what do you mean with post?
Like if you take a character, so for example. Where's my guy?
It's like scans.
You could, I mean, I scan myself for this, right? This is me, like from a photogrammetry scan. But what I mean by, if you find the skeletal mesh here. Right, so this character just has a material assigned to it, right? You could just assign a different material to that character. So right click, material.
But then, you can tap right aside, you go.
Yeah.
From.
Oh, yeah.
Walking. So smoothly. Things are supposed to go into studios. Like, the performances, so that's like the one on the 50 bucks.
There's pretty
Yeah.
There is pretty, it's like G scatter or something.
Yeah, but
Oh, it's awesome.
was praised for.
Right, like I can just put like an unlit material.
Yeah.
And just assign it to the character, and they'll just sort of be like a silhouette.
Isn't that? Huge?
I mean, what's weirder? Right, it's just, you kind of get, yeah, exactly, it's like, it's just. Right. So it's not ideal, but maybe that. Like, what's worse, having ghosted characters or having an empty village, right? So you just kind of have to weigh those two things. But I don't think it's like a futile exercise to try out the metagame and start learning that. If that's something that you think, because it's always something that I've been interested in exploring myself in terms of like these kind of virtual gaming environments, rendered environments that architects use that are kind of packed with strange people that are supposed to be representative of the user systems. There's a certain amount of racism, colonialism, these feelings involved. And so, yeah, so how do we start to think about race in the virtual environment, right? How do we identify ourselves? Like if we create our own personal avatars, you go to like places like VR chat, people turn themselves into, whatever they want, right? And so when you have free reign over your own identity in these types of virtual spaces, like I think there's something to be said about like how how does that reflect on society as a whole? Like our view of whether it's standards of beauty or kind of dominant cultures or the way we perceive these things, especially with AI and the idea of how AI is essentially racist. Because material that's being inserted into it is obviously from a specific group or source. So it favors hegemony, right? So yeah, I mean, I think it's an interesting topic to go into, but obviously it requires quite a bit of work.
Yeah. This is some story and so.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'll look for some. But yeah, I mean the thing is it's meta humans and then you're adding custom clothes. So the search you would do is probably similar to what I would do. But yeah, if I come across something, I'll definitely send you away.
This is kind of unrelated, but if there's ever like software that we're interested in, but it like wants a lot of money, can we ask Gail to
Oh yeah, absolutely.
pay for it?
You should.
Okay, do I contact?
I would say normally Vin, but Vin is not here every day. I don't know who is in charge. You could probably just write a ticket.
The 18.
Yeah. I would, and then see if that's possible. I mean, it depends on how much seat costs, but they have, I mean, it's a pretty rich school, so.
Yeah.
Does anyone else have questions? Big problems they're running into? Or just having a hard time starting? Otherwise, I'll show a couple of other things that might be of interest. No? Okay. Another kind of cool thing that happened in virtual land is I think sometime last year or 2 years ago, Google decided to discontinue Google Earth. Like they're no longer developing for it, but they've made the API accessible to everyone. So you can take the data set from Google Earth and import it into, you probably import it into Rhino, Blender, Unreal Engine, Unity, and use it essentially freely, right? If you use it for a commercial purpose, then you do have to pay the piper. But if you're just kind of using it for visualization, it's a little bit complicated, but it's more or less free. And so I'm gonna maybe go over how you might do that if you wanted to integrate this into your scene. And Kaiwen has been using the map set for his project, but I do think for architectural visualization in general, for like your studio projects, this could be pretty helpful or potentially helpful. Keep in mind, like, I don't know if you've ever gotten close to a Google Earth model. It's pretty like low poly. And so it really only works for like hero shots or like aerial views. But what you need to set that up is a plugin called Cesium. And so if you go to right click, I don't know if it comes built in, maybe not. So let's close this out. I'm going to close out Unreal, save my scene. And when Epic Games Launcher comes back on, what I want to do is go into I think my marketplace and type Cesium. And what we want is Cesium for Unreal, right? And Cesium is just a company that works with geospatial data, kind of like gis, Esri. So I want to install this to the engine. And I want to add it to whatever engine version you're working on. In our case, it's 5.3. So I'm going to install this. And let it run. Right. While this is going, I want to kind of find out where I want to be in the world, right? Because you're essentially importing the entire planet into your scene. So I'm going to do, let's say, Google Maps. Sure. And then I'm going to type knock again, capsule tower. Right, so here is where it used to be. We can see the right. Here's where it used to be. What I care about is the coordinates. Right, so I think I can right click here, copy those coordinates. I'm going to open my notepad. Paste it. Right. And I can't really tell if it's east or west. We'll have to sort that out, but it'll be obvious where we are once we open Unreal. Right. So Cesium has been installed to 5.3. I'm going to open my project file again. So edit plugins. And now if I type Cesium, we'll see Cesium for Unreal. I'm going to check it. It's going to ask me to restart. I'm going to go ahead and restart and let it open back up. By the way, if anyone has questions about their projects, please feel free to interrupt. Yeah.
While it's loading, it's pretty fast, but I just wanted to show you my graphs. So
Shape and blocks with these.
I was really, so this is like scenes of foliage, it's like a grass texture, but you know, how, like as soon as you start to.
Yeah.
So should I just like look for a better grass texture or put foliage in?
I would maybe look for a better grass texture. I wouldn't put false filter because this doesn't make a difference.
It's possible just like this.
Are you using a landscape or is it something?
No, important.
Yeah.
But I might
Probably this
end up
is-
rebuilding it.
Because my water is- because of like the-
Yeah, I could send some tutorials on how to work with landscapes in Unreal, which will give you a bit more flexibility in terms of like viewing terrain from distance. You could do similarly, I was suggesting, like cutting it into smaller pieces and adding higher quality textures to each piece. That might give you a little bit more information. But yeah, it's a little bit tricky. How much of a view are you granting?
But like. I'm like this. And then I'll.
What would be in the back, like you would have?
Yeah.
Yeah. What's the issue you want to just see? I guess you have a reference. You want the sort of grasp of like, this. Yeah. I mean, the other thing to do is, see if I can find something. All right, I'm on it. Legend profile, water body function. I think it needs. Um. If you go to Quixel Bridge and you look for in natural environments, maybe rocky grassland. There are places. The three assets. Nature. What kind of environment would you say your scene is in? Is it like tundra environment or
Yeah.
like kind of tundra? Let's see if there's. Yeah. Like they have assets like this. And you can kind of scale and scatter these things around in a way. Like you can grab rocks. So it just kind of breaks up the repetition patterns, right? So if you wanted this, for instance, you could download, like in theory, this whole scene was created using these assets, just kind of like moved and rotated. And this will come with its own foliage. But you can add. You could add it anywhere. So here. Right, in view. You can kind of scale these to a certain extent where you're not gonna be able to see the difference if it's stretched or not. I mean, if you scale it too much, I think it does start to obviously not work, but you have a certain amount of flexibility. And reverse it. You can kind of scatter these at various moments. And from ground level, like it just starts to kind of, you can't tell that there's something here, right? It's like one asset that's repeated 3 times and probably repeated, get quite a bit out of it. But you know, there's several of these, so you can start to take this one and some of these or some of these other ones. Right? And anytime you see something massive, it's actually covering quite a bit of territory. So it sort of does the work for you as long as it fits the sort of visual references that you. So I would maybe for the aerial scenes, start to consider using assets like this. And you could also change the quality as well. Medium is fine, but if you're looking at it from afar, like low might be okay if you start to feel like it's slowing down. But you're really only going to get this view from your cinematic, I would imagine. Right? If you're in VR or you at ground level.
Yeah.
Yeah, so if it starts to get very heavy, you could turn off those assets in the VR scene and just use it for your cinematic, right? And then you could sort of bump up the quality. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so let's get Japan, right? So once you enable the cesium asset, you can click on the cesium tab. And we want to import, oh shit, I don't want to do that. We actually want to import, actually, no, we have to connect first. So you connect to cesium using your Epic Games account. And then you just have to give permission. Who knows what that just did, but it's going to let us use their plugin. Okay, so now my tab allows me to add a variety of 3D data sets or geospatial data sets. And I want to add Google photorealistic 3D tiles. You need to create a license. Cesium kind of handles that for you. So you can create a new token and create a project default token. And it's going to populate your scene with Google Earth. Right, I'm going to change my EV settings back. Oh wait, no, that was my key set. Right, so we can start to see, I don't know why this looks dithered, but it shouldn't look dithered for you. I don't know what's going on. Maybe it's my post-process volume. Let's delete this for a moment. No, I didn't really do it. And then what this does is it creates these assets. We want to go to the photorealistic tiles, I think, or maybe georeference. I think we want to put our coordinates in here. 35.6. And then 139.76. Hopefully that takes us to Japan. Like it does. Right? And then I might want to change my origin height. Bring me down closer to the ground. Right? Something like that. So I'm in the highway. I can, refine my position a little bit more. But in theory, this should be the location of where the capsule tower used to be, roughly. And so now from within my scene, right, probably a little overkill to have the entire world in, just so I could look out this tiny little portal window. But we are in VR land, so we can do whatever the hell we want.
Thank you.
Right, so now I can go in here. Let's just delete this background image for now. Right. So now I can kind of give myself like a more realistic view, right? Which maybe from this distance, it still looks okay. This building right next to me doesn't look so great, right? So, take this with a grain of salt. But if we zoom out a little bit, from a distance like this, like you're gonna be able to sort of populate a hero shot that you might be working on for a rendering, and have a pretty nice background without having to do much work. Right. The other thing is if you're working with a real site, there is something, and I won't jump into it. I won't go into it too much, but there is something called the cesium cartographic polygon. Actually, before I get to that, let me show you. So I can turn off my directional light. I'm going to delete that. And I can add a cesium sun sky. And what this will allow me to do is change things like the time of day. And so if I scroll down to date and time, I can basically kind of simulate. I don't know why this is so shiny. Where's the sun? I don't know why this is blowing out. It might be because of my bloom in my post-process volume. So let's turn that off. That's not it. It's not rendering right on my screen, but it should work. Right, you can change the solar time and kind of adjust the time of day. I don't know why it's blowing out here, but you could change the day, the month, the year, the time, change your time zone. I don't know what time zone Japan is in. I think it's like not -5. And so you can start to get a sense of the actual daylighting conditions of a project you might be working on for studio in its real location, in its real world location. Are you in it now, Liam?
Yeah.
Is your screen dithered like this?
Yeah.
It is? I wonder why that is. I wonder if they changed this. They used to not do this. Maybe for the free version, they like did this. It's very not nice. but still, could be useful. Yeah, I think we're at time. If you guys have any questions between now and next week, please let me know. It's festival style, right? So I'll post some assignments, but you'll be responsible for having your video, your 30-second cinematic, your VR environment. And the only ad is a short description of what your project is about and a movie poster, right? Just one image, right, of what you're descriptive of your project, right? And so so the jurors will be, including you guys, will be walking around trying out everyone's VR scenes. And I'm gonna set up a ballot so that the students can vote on what they thought was their favorite. So everyone's just kind of walking around exploring these scenes and trying them out. Hopefully you're trying out all of them. And then you can sort of pick best in show after that. Okay. It's meant to be fun, so hopefully you guys have fun, not just going through the festival, but also making your projects. And so if you're not having fun, let me know. I'll figure out how to make this fun for you.
Yes.
I don't know yet. They haven't all responded, so I'll let you know later.
Would you picture what you and the made our quest? So,
Thank you. I'll take that.
Are they all internal? Like,
Not necessarily. The guests, they haven't been historically, but we'll see what happens. I try to have someone from the industry come, like that works in sort of spatial media. So we'll see if I can encourage someone to attend. It's hard this time of year. Okay, so like I said, please email me if you have questions. There is a possibility of tutorials or office hours as well. I have the Google Sheet. You guys saw that email?
Yes.
If you want to sign up, you should feel free to do so. And then, yeah, I'll look forward to seeing your project. Don't stress out about it. Okay? It's just, you know, if you get 80% there, fantastic. If you're 50% there, who cares? Like, that's as far as you got. That's not a big deal. All right. I think it's really more about establishing your goals and just trying to get as close to that goal as possible. Like, this is not studio. No one's judging you, right? And this is the first time you've used the software, which is very complex software, right? And so, like, just have fun with it. Like, make one thing work really well, and you know, someone might have the time of their life, right? It doesn't have to be overthought. It doesn't have to be overwrought. Just, yeah. As long as you're getting something out of it. I hope you guys are getting something out of it. Other than, I'm never using that software. Is anyone there yet? Or thinking that? Kind of. That's okay too.